Okay, I'm live again. I'm hoping you guys can hear me now. Let's see if I go on YouTube and I'm able to hear myself. That would be nice. Okay, next one. Here we go. Why isn't it working for me tonight? I'll tell you. Here we go. Hmm. This is really interesting, you guys. Let's see. Okay. Save. Save. Okay, let's see now. Thanks for bearing with me. I had a really great show planned. There's still one person watching, whoever you are, mahalo. I hope you can hear me now. And let's see. Hear me now? Yes, now you can hear me. And let's see. Yes, now you can hear me. And let's see. Yes, now you can hear me. Okay, and there's some reverb, but it's because my phone's so close. So, okay. Well, let's just try and forge ahead here. And so junk that, I have problems with this, but that's okay. It's okay because it's my first time and I don't know all this stuff and I'm just getting used to this. So, we were talking about how the crazy white right wingers are occupying the U.S. Capitol, and it's left one dead and at least 52 arrests. And what a horrible show. It's just really been quite the mess there. We've never seen anything like this. We were talking about how if you were brown or black, you would have been pepper sprayed, you would have been maced, you would have been, arrested, brutalized. So it's really a trip, the double standard. And I had read some mana'o from Dawn Niederhauser, my sister of mine. Home Again is the name of her blog. She's from Washington, D.C., and she says to comment about what happened today. I would say that as someone who worked in D.C. for years, it sickened and appalled me. And what sickened and appalled me the most was that the police treated those thugs with respect. And had they been black or brown, everyone knows there would have been bloodshed. My friend Medea Benjamin of Code Pink has been dragged out of that building and arrested for standing and holding a sign. My colleague is all for the 25th Amendment thing. So, that's from someone who's lived and worked in DC for most of her life. And that's just one of the comments that we've heard from some local residents now that are here that have been transplanted from stateside. One of the things we saw the mayor of DC on the air talking about today was how they were so prepared for this peaceful protest, and they had all of the National Guard there, all of the Capitol Police, and you saw these people just brutalizing the state capitol. I mean, the capital of the United States of America, smashing windows. There was one guy with his seat sitting in the Senate president's seat with his feet up on the desk. And like I said, you could imagine if brown people or people of color were doing these kinds of things. Like you think of Standing Rock, you think of our kupuna up on Mauna Kea that, were dragged in their wheelchairs with their oxygen tanks for standing. And then these people, because they're white and mostly from out of town, at the urging of the now president, Donald Trump, got to do whatever they wanted. So it's just really a trip. Moving on, where is Barack Obama in all of this? The black hero. Like for me, He's just as bad as all of them. He is a centrist Democrat who could give a shit about the poor people. Right now, he's paddleboarding in Kailua with his Secret Service boys in tow. Not a care in the world as he creates his own empire in Hawaii while the capital is being stormed and his friends are hunkered down over there. And I don't know if you knew this, but Barack Obama is building his own wall. Yes, he's building a seawall in front of his home in Waimanalo so that he can have his own private surf break. Now, the problem with this seawall is what it's going to do is going to destroy the last remaining natural habitat of the Hawaiian sea turtle. So all of the Hawaiians are really pissed off because poor Waimanalo has gone through so much lately, right? And it's just nails that everyone worships this man who supposedly is a Hawaiian. You know, he went to Punahou. But like many Punahou graduates, not a care in the world when it comes to people less fortunate than himself. Um, yeah. So build your wall, Obama, because mass extinction of Hawaiian sea turtles so you can surf, right? That's a thing nowadays. Those pesky sea turtles are busily occupying Obama's beachfront Obama Lagos. But that's what's going on with Obama right now. He's currently in Kailua at Lani Cry with his paddleboard. Moving on, COVID updates from here and there. Jen Noilani on Maui, Nokaoi, reports that her housing project, groovily called Harbor Lights, or as it's romantically referred to as Harbor Fights, overlooking the Kahului Harbor, fragranced by offal, is a cozy COVID fest with more than 68 diagnosed reported cases amongst some of the most unfortunate of Hawaii's residents. Owned by slumlord Greg Goudet, rhymes with pig bidet. He's a member of biggerpockets.com. Have you heard of that website, biggerpockets.com? Well, my sister's housing boasts leaky fridges, leaky toilets, frozen windows, doors that don't close properly, so COVID flies freely through the pleasantly fish-frying scented air. Harbor Lights, just don't light a match. Gas is abundantly available. And cleanliness is optional. Masks, who cares? It's just a big, nasty ass party COVID spready thing at Harbor Lights. It never ends. And this is again on the island of Maui. Mr. Goudet says on biggerpockets.com, which is a site dedicated to some of Bob Marley's crazy bald heads from the Babylon crew. He says he moved broke ass to Maui to become a landlord and has just bought his first Porsche with cash dollars. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. Good on ya, G'day. Way to exploit the Polynesians at the bottom of the barrel so you can cruise in style in the truly specially designed brand of traffic by Maui's DOT on Maui no Kaoi. And I have to say, what a lucky bugger Greg Goudet and other slumlords like him throughout Hawaii are aided and abetted by the feds, the fake state, HUD housing, numerous nonprofits that are able to just continue profiting by mooching off the poor. Brilliant way to drain the swamp. All you Trumpers out there, how about putting your energy towards draining the swamp right here at home? Just saying. Well, I hope you're enjoying so far. I'm not sure who's on with me right now, but this is my first time and I'm sitting outside in my yard. I'm literally on the side of a live volcano and it's super quiet here. Not even many kokies tonight. It's about 60 degrees. I love it. And it's just a beautiful place. Hard to believe this stuff is going on in the world. Later on in the show, I'm going to bring you Keaopuni's update from Leon-Siu. But right now, I want to get into a very heavy part of this podcast. And this is from Dr. Doug Herman, who is the executive director of the Pacific Worlds Institute, Hawaii. and the former senior geographer, Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. And it's a fairly lengthy article, which he will be publishing later on the website pacificworlds.com/Haena, and other places where this article is going to be published. You may remember him from one of my shows where he came and spoke about epidemics and what happens here in the islands with the epidemics. And so this is a very interesting article. It's called Thinking of Visiting Hawaii Right Now? The Reasons Not to Have Epidemic Proportions by Dr. Doug Herman. So I'm going to get into it. And like I said, it's kind of long, but I hope you enjoy it. It's really, really interesting. And if you like this, please hit the like button, share the link out on Facebook right now, share it out. Whoever's watching, please share it out. This is really good stuff for us people here in Hawaii, and it's written by an expert. Dr. Doug is a personal friend of mine, and he actually speaks Hawaiian fluently. He's got a doctorate in Pacific Studies and has been around Hawaii and the Pacific for a while. So here we go with the article. Where's your aloha spirit? Asked many recent visitors to the Hawaiian Islands whose arrivals since the coronavirus outbreak have been received with less than friendliness by local people. The tourism industry has for decades billed these islands as the land of aloha, where smiling brown people will serve your expensive meal, clean your hotel room, and make you feel more than welcome. It's a theme that's played directly into the mainstream American sense of entitlement. It's a free country. I have a right to go anywhere I please, and you should thank me for the dollars I'm putting into your economy. For many of Hawaii's residents, descended either from Native Hawaiians or from Asians who came to work the sugar and pineapple plantations, those days are over for now, and maybe forever. While some people in the continental U.S. accuse mask mandates of violating their rights and wave the banner of individual freedom, the majority of Hawaii's residents have taken a very different approach. Protect each other and protect the elders at all costs. While the arrival of vaccines for the coronavirus shines a light at the end of the pandemic tunnel, we are not there yet. Hospitals are overwhelmed as lax practices have left the virus flourish. And yet, despite warnings against travel, airlines are experiencing a peak and people with coronavirus are still getting on planes. Mo'ohihia is the Hawaiian term for intergenerational trauma. From when Captain James Cook first stepped ashore in 1778 until now, these islands have been washed over by waves of epidemics, and not just diseases that affect humans directly. As I wrote in this previous article, introduced diseases wreaked havoc from that first documented visit of a Westerner to these shores. But to truly understand how local people here feel, it's important for visitors to know that there have been 4 types of epidemics that have transformed these islands from the paradise that once was to the make-believe paradise that visitors now experience. And if you're just tuning in, I'm reading an article written by Dr. Doug Herman, formerly of the Smithsonian Institute for the American Indian. These islands were home to perhaps 700,000 native peoples when Westerners arrived. Over 2,000 miles of ocean from the nearest land, these people were healthy and completely self-sufficient, with agricultural systems that were highly praised by early Western explorers. One who visited with Captains Portlock and Dixon in the late 1780s wrote under the initials CL that Hawaii Island has beautiful appearance, seeming to be formed in distinct plantations, and all in the highest state of cultivation. Trees of everlasting verdure decorate the higher grounds, and limpid streams meander through the soil, increasing its fertility and adding to the beauty of the enchanting scene. Wow. Right now, in my forest, There's so many invasive species. There's no order and nothing like what this man experienced. But moving on. Already at that point, infectious diseases introduced by visiting Westerners had begun a cataclysmic transformation of the islands that destroyed every aspect of the paradise that CL saw, and not just of the human population. The destruction wrought had truly epidemic proportions. Waves of epidemics, diseases, pests, new plants and crops, and new people destroyed the carefully balanced paradise that once was, and in the end has replaced much of it with a phony paradise for visitors and a brutal reality for Native Hawaiians and the descendants of plantation workers. The coronavirus pandemic, his men passed on the venereals. The actual disease has not been definitely identified of which one it was. Um, on their first visit, and when they returned 6 months later, the disease had spread throughout the archipelago. When the French explorer La Perouse arrived in 1786, he said of Hawaiian women that their dress permitted us to observe in most of them traces of the ravages occasioned by the venereal disease. Not an outright killer for the most part, the disease could render the people infertile and began the steep downward decline of the Hawaiian population. Arriving here more than 1,000 years ago after millennia of migration out of Southeast Asia, the Hawaiian people lived in isolation from other people, and like the native people of the Americas, had never experienced the diseases that had affected the Old World. This made them virgin populations who had not, through exposure, developed resilience or immunities. They died by the droves. New England missionary Levi Chamberlain from Dover, Vermont, wrote in 1829 that there have been 2 seasons of destructive sickness, both within the period of 30 years, by which, according to the account of the natives, more than 1/2 of the population of the island was swept away. The united testimony of all whom I have ever made any inquiry respecting the sickness has been that greater was the number of the dead than of the living. As I wrote in this article, the missionaries and their white cohorts blamed the Hawaiians themselves, saying such things as the lower classes are a mass of corruption. Sound familiar? Words cannot express the depths of vice and degradation to which they have sunk from time immemorial. Their very blood is corrupted, and the springs of life tainted with disease, by which a premature old age and untimely death ensues. Can you imagine? They said that about our people that never used to have diseases. It's just, these were Christians. The germs kept coming, the epidemics kept raging. Cholera in 1804, influenza in 1820, measles and whooping cough, mumps first in 1839, measles and whooping cough, and of course influenza, 1848 to 9, and smallpox in 1853. These led King Kamehameha V in 1869 to establish the first quarantine station on a small island off Honolulu. Leprosy came in the late 1800s. Don't like quarantine? How about quarantine for life? Native Hawaiians and other non-whites who contracted the disease were isolated on the remote Makanalua Peninsula of Molokai, walled off by the cliffs on the backside of Molokai. A guard was posted atop the cliff with orders to shoot on sight anyone trying to escape, but infected whites were allowed to travel back to their families on the continent with their leprosy. Sound familiar? The good news is, well, at the time of this writing, I don't know if this is still true, but at the time of this writing of this article, the Kalawao County, which includes that peninsula plus the neighboring valleys, was right now the only county in the entire United States that had no COVID-19 cases. Now travelers risk bringing COVID-19 here so they can have a vacation. Okay, so the second is pests. Second epidemic. The islands were truly a paradise. No mosquitoes, no stinging insects, few to no poisonous or thorny plants. Mosquitoes arrived in 1826. Pox and avian malaria arrived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The mosquitoes spread these diseases to the endemic native bird populations. Now, most native birds are extinct below 2,000 feet elevation. As more and more alien insects arrived, the native insect life was devastated. The rosy wolf snail, introduced in 1955 to attack the 1936 introduced giant African snails, devastated the wide array of endemic Hawaiian land snails. And the list goes on and on and on. As the state's Department of Land and Natural Resources points out, while comprising less than 1% of the USA's landmass, Hawaii accounts for 44% of the entire U.S. endangered and threatened species list. Continental plant species. Let's see, where did I go here? I lost my place. Hey, Kalamai. Sometimes when you touch these phones, yeah, the thing moves around and you got to go find them again. Okay, here we are. Continental plant species, introduced for various reasons, aggressively wiped out much of the native fauna. In some cases, seeds have come on the clothing and boots of visitors. And I want to add in my mentor, Marcia Erickson, who created Huiolaka and actually founded the Volcano House here in Hawaii Island. She taught me that the seeds also come in the tires of cars that get shipped over from stateside. So all these cars you see with foreign license plates on them from the United States, they're bringing those seeds in their tires to our islands, and this is why we're so overrun. Today, native vegetation, like native birds, has been virtually extinguished in the lower elevations of the islands. And what you, the tourist, see today is almost nothing like what CL saw from his ship. Sure, it can look beautiful, but what you see is, as with the people, mostly replacements of what was native. And it's really true. Because even on this island, when you look at the slopes of Waimea, for example, all of those slopes used to be covered with koa and sandalwood trees. And now you see these huge plains, for the cattle ranchers. So everything's really different now. Coffee with Fireball. Anyway, let's see. Hawaiians were deeply connected and still are, both culturally and materially, with plants and birds that are now extinct. The environment they knew and depended upon is now mostly gone, replaced by these invaders. Okay, third epidemic is crops. These too came in waves: rice, coffee, pineapple, and so on, right? All the things we enjoy today. Sugarcane is actually a Polynesian introduction. And I have to tell you, in case you don't know, the Polynesians used raw sugarcane to clean their teeth, not to sweeten food. It was to clean their teeth, and they used it medicinally. So they weren't growing it agriculturally. Transforming the land into plantations to produce sugarcane factory style is like the capitalist economy that drove it, a white introduction. As the Hawaiian government privatized land starting in 1848, previously all land had been held in stewardship by the chiefs. Plantations took off and soon took over much of the land, like plagues. What was destroyed here was not only the system by which the native population had sustained themselves from the land, but entire cultural landscapes. Hawaiians might rent lands to a large plantation, only to have those where all the familiar landmarks had been, and expanse of rice or sugarcane would stretch out. As historian John H. Wise wrote, ditches had been filled in, dikes had been leveled off, hedges had been cut down. Today, land under taro, the staple food for Hawaiians, is so small that there's not enough produce to meet demand, making prices high. This is a food that people from the continent don't eat for the most part, but Hawaiians and others who grew up here do. And it's very healthy, right? Even the plantations, local food production is not profitable. Even the plantations have closed because rents are high, meaning labor is expensive. As a 2012 Hawaii state government document reports, between 85 to 90% of Hawaii's food is imported, which makes it particularly vulnerable to natural disasters and global events like a pandemic that might disrupt shipping and the food supply. And with this imported food and the loss of traditional diet has come yet more epidemics that particularly affect Native Hawaiians. As a 2016 study points out, Native Hawaiians have the shortest life expectancy and exhibit higher mortality rates than the total population due to heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. Poor health is inextricably linked to socioeconomic factors, and Native Hawaiians are more likely to live below the poverty level, experience higher rates of unemployment, live in crowded and impoverished conditions, and experience imprisonment. I just mentioned one of the housing projects on Maui, where my sister lives. Their slumlord just bought a Porsche with cash. He boasted on biggerpockets.com. His name is Greg Goudet, and he won't fix anything. And they've diagnosed about 68 people with COVID, but there are no COVID protocols in place. There's no mask enforcement. There's nothing going on except the people are coughing and spraying COVID and spreading it around. And I would imagine that most of the housing projects that our people live in are pretty much going on in the same direction. Noteworthy and disturbing are the high percentage of Native Hawaiians who are homeless in their own island homeland. And then the final epidemic are people. Plantations needed labor, and with Hawaiians dying out and not wanting to work on the plantations, actually, white planters turned to other sources in the Asia-Pacific region. This led to waves of new populations: Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Okinawans, Portuguese, Filipinos, as well as smaller percentages of other groups like the Puerto Ricans. I'm bringing them in. This created a semi-feudal society. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And those who grew up in the plantation totally get that statement. Divided into plantation owners, and the latter mingled together culturally, then also physically, bonded by a new language, Hawaiian Creole English, known as Pidgin. This collective has emerged as local culture, which can include almost any ethnicity except white people, because they were the plantation owners. Together with the Native Hawaiian culture, this mix of ethnicities work together as one community in order to survive the challenges of life, says Moises Madayag, the curator of Grove Farm Museum in Lihue, Kauai. This paved the way to how we do things, hear each other, come to each other's aid when others are in need, and treat others with respect. This resulted in a beautiful coexistence and mutual respect of the way of life for others. And I used to teach plantation history at the Kauai Museum to the kids. And like I would tell the kids, the people that came over here, they came with pretty much the clothes on their back. If they got here and they didn't have shoes, too bad. You get in there and you go to work. 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and then you go church all day Sunday. If you're having a baby, you go behind the bushes and squat and have your baby. You give it to the missionary lady and you get back to work. It was merciless. It was horrible. These people arrived here. They had to come together. They had to come together. Otherwise, they wouldn't have survived. So they ended up, being a collective, sharing their food. And those of you who have heard of our famous box lunch, it different stuff in it from the different camps, you know, and that's how they survived. That's how they were able to survive, because the Christian white people that were controlling them. I want to tell you that the least paid laborers in the plantation were the Puerto Rican women. They were paid 8 cents a year. And then all of their food was taken out of that, so it was plantations. It was horrible, but no one was watching, really, right? So these things went on. Then another wave came and keeps coming until the mid-1960s. Travel to the islands from continental USA was prohibitive. Then the airfares went down. The result, deregulation, right? By 1970, 1/4 of the entire state's population had moved here in the previous 5 years, mostly white people. Such transplants continue to arrive, driving up housing costs and all too often never giving up the American culture of individuality and private property. They come with far more money than most local people, bringing their white privilege and decorating their properties with non-native plants to create the paradise they envision. Hey, calamine. Okay. Some of these properties that I've seen around here, even the one that we own now, we're fortunate. All the rock walls, all the antiquities on Kauai and Princeville. I used to clean houses up there, and I would be in these mansions, and in the backyard, all of our antiquities, our stones, rock walls, artifacts, poi pounders, anything they find on the property. Whole hotels built in our heiau complexes to create the paradise that they envision. Local people are literally paying for the cost of this pandemic. Kauai's median sale price for houses hit close to $1 million in November in resort areas. Council member and a tour driver and a dad and an amazing man. He didn't have to die of COVID. I'm just inserting that into here. That also happened in November. While the house prices were going up $1 million, our friend was dying alone in the hospital of COVID. Not only are the rents high, but wages are low, giving Hawaii the distinction of having the country's largest gap between what the average renter makes and the needs to occupy the 2-bedroom unit at fair market rent. This leaves local people working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and many of those jobs involve serving tourists. In 2019, over 10 million visitors came. That's almost 10 tourists for every one resident. And they come expecting the paradise that they've been sold. This brings us full circle to today's pandemic, coronavirus. Now, many continental people want to come here to ride out the pandemic, and the state government is encouraging it, offering free flights to remote workers who want to live here temporarily. Understandably, the local people recoil in horror. During the summer and early fall months, when travel was limited, not only were some islands virtually COVID-free, but the natural environment started to recover from the 10.5 million visitors who came here last year. The state's population is 1/10 of that. So These are my words, okay? So if there's, we're 1/10, that means we're surrounded in a huddle by 10 visitors to one of us. And that's a lot of visitors. And I always I compare it to like a football huddle, and you're the football and they're tossing you around and moving you up and down the field. It's like crazy. 1/10 of the state's population, or 10.5 million visitors who came here last year, and the state's population is about 1/10 of that. Locals are able to enjoy beaches now that were previously too crowded with tourists. And yet we are wearing masks. Why? Again, because it is inherent in local culture to be responsible to each other. Even with few to no cases on the island of Kauai, thanks to the stringent measures of our mayor, the ethos of looking after each other prevails. Local culture is the opposite of American individuality. These are small islands, and what goes around comes around rather quickly. Most local people are part of extended families consolidated here. Elders are respected and cared for. This is the village of It Takes a Village. But our visitors are mostly not like that at all. Why else would they choose to vacation in the midst of a pandemic? As one local resident, Kaylee Wilson, reported, we've had a surge in our building alone, and every night I've seen about 15 to 20 people in the hot tub. At the coffee shop, there's been plenty, about 40, 50 people outside, not spacing, and 90% of them not wearing masks. The Honolulu Star Advertiser reports Hawaii residents are largely hesitant to reopen the state to tourism. Nearly 2/3 of Hawaii residents strongly or somewhat agree that people from outside the state should not be visiting Hawaii at this time. Meanwhile, 62% disagreed that the state and county governments can safely reopen tourism and that the 14-day mandatory quarantine is being effectively enforced. The same survey showed that visitors are meanwhile complaining that the destination isn't back to its pre-pandemic level of activities and services. Media pieces are complaining that local people are not showing tourists the aloha that is expected of them. Some restaurants have banned tourists from eating there. One article argued what is being masked as COVID concern by some Hawaii residents is, in my opinion, more endemic of the local view of outsiders than it is a matter of safety. A Los Angeles Times piece asks, is Hawaii ready for visitors? Meanwhile, Hawaii resident Angela Keene, we know her as Sister Ipo Keene, organized a vigilante group, Hawaii Quarantine Kapu Breakers, the Taboo Breakers. With around 6,500 members, the group helps law enforcement catch those who refuse to follow the rules and break quarantine. And Derek Kawakami, the mayor of Kauai, has chosen to opt out of the recently instigated pre-travel testing program after travel-related COVID cases more than quadrupled statewide since non-essential travel was opened back up in October. But the economy, you say? True, in 2019, visitor spending and state and visitor taxes netted nearly $20 billion and accounts for 23% of local economic activity. But recent travel testing restrictions have left us vulnerable. A few days ago, a traveler from the continent tested positive for COVID, even though she tested negative both before and after she arrived. And the resources are scarce. 9 ICU beds on the island of Kauai. Those are taken up by visitors. What's left for local people? We're on an island. We can't drive them by ambulance to another location. Until vaccines put the pandemic to rest, now is time for all of us to stay home and take care of each other. For the Hawaiian Islands and for Native Hawaiian people in particular, it's like PTSD. As Iini Kahakalau says in this smack your face video, don't come with the whole, but I love Hawaii. Let's be very clear. You do not love Hawaii. You enjoy it. If you loved Hawaii, you would have stayed home. Trauma has been suffered here so many times and in so many ways. These islands have been devastated and reshaped to serve outside interests. Please, not one more time. Please stay home. Keep us all safe until this is over. Then, if and when you do come, please come with respect. And that's the article written by Dr. R.D.K. Herman of the Pacific Worlds Institute here in Hawaii, formerly of the Smithsonian Institute for the American Indian. And he's kind of the expert on epidemics in the Pacific Rim. So he's written many articles about this. And I just want to say a big mahalo to you, Dr. Doug, for putting this article together that's just so interesting, and yet it really puts it all into perspective for us. Mahalo nui loa to you, Dr. Doug. And I hope you're enjoying. It's been about 40 minutes. I was trying to think I was going to do half an hour, but I'm going to continue on. And then as time goes on, we'll see how this goes. And if you've just joined in, I think someone keeps trying to come on and off, but I'm sitting outside in my yard. It's super quiet. The air is crisp and clean. It's hard to believe that there was a riot at the White House today. It's hard to believe that we're in a pandemic when you sit here outside and just breathe this clean, beautiful air here on Hawaii Island. And I'm just so grateful to be here on Hawaii. But you know, there are some not so very, let's just say there's some people around here that they still think this thing is not real. And so to them, I want to say, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? And to this portion of the show, I want to address and Kalania Sam and the HKGA, who organized a garden planting event on January 3rd to plant vegetables for the keiki, but guess where? Around the Kamehameha statue, some of the most contaminated soil in all Hawaii due to the tsunami. Spray there all the time. And it's my opinion that these guys just want to be. Asked your friend Arrow, who reached out to me to help promote your event. I thought perhaps you might have a COVID protocol, like hand washing stations and a mask. You know, people should wear masks because the Hawaiian people are extremely vulnerable. And he boasted that these so-called kupuna were organizing these events. The direct lineal descendant of Kamehameha III, and I'm supposing that's you, Kalania Sam, because you talk about being the descendant of the king, but you don't really behave like a king very much. And then Jean Tamashiro, who supposedly works for the Hawaiian kingdom, but Jean, you're not even Hawaiian. Not one drop. And the fact that you guys think it's okay to encourage people to gather when you're supposed to have less than 10 people, social distancing, wear a mask, hand sanitizer. Like if you guys are going to plant a garden, stay home and plant your garden, Kay. But if you're going to do an event, put in place some COVID protocols, or I will blow you out of the water with my reports, because we just don't need more of our people to die. Right now, we don't need to be planting public gardens in contaminated soil. We need to stay alive. And Kalania Sam and Jean Tamashiro and all of their gang, they call it a scamdemic. They don't believe it's real. But what if you guys are wrong? What if you're wrong? And what if wearing a mask would save my life? Would you do it? You just heard me talk about the culture of responsibility, being responsible to each other. So I'm going to encourage you HKGA guys, and yes, it's men. It's men not thinking, calling it a scamdemic, and pretending there's no pandemic going on. And it's very irresponsible. Our ali'i made quarantine stations. Kamehameha III would not encourage a gathering, garden planting gathering right now during a pandemic, he'd be telling us to hunker down and take care of our health. So you guys are really irresponsible, and you don't behave like an elite at all by leading your people into danger, because here's the thing, you guys. I know you think it's not real, but almost 500,000 people have died. And a lot of our people have died before. So what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? I want to send some shout outs to a lot of my pals and friends that have supported me along the way. And I'm pretty sure all of you are snoozing because most of you guys is old and you can watch this tomorrow. But shout out to Kumu Kavaile Hua Hewitt. Love you. Love you so much, Tutu Man. And I'm hoping Tutu Man's going to take over Wednesday morning Songs of Sovereignty, and I produce remotely. We're still talking about that. Sister Sandy Pa and Kapua Maderas, Mokihana Iida, all of our gang over in Waimanalo, standing strong against the seawall now. Before it was Hunana Iho and it was the windmills, and now it's against Barack Obama and the wall that he's building to kill all the turtles so he can go surf. Again, Kalani Souza, Julie Stoll, and Chris Schaefer, my Ohana mentors and dear friends who taught me everything I know techie-wise. And I know I'm kind of not doing that great of a job tonight, but I'll get better. I want to say much alohas to Hank Fergestrom. You'll always be Hanale to me, my dear mentor and kupuna. And you know what? You can check out Uncle Hank right here on YouTube. The video is called Uncle Hank Public Law 103-150. It's the bomb. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging in with me so long. On the next show, we'll bring you our Keo Puni update. I think I've filled your ears with enough and given you something to think about. Again, please like this show, subscribe to my channel. If you're watching, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, share the link for me. I really appreciate you. Much aloha to you. And until we meet again, malama i ke kahi, malama pono. Nighty night. Love you.